At dawnbreak, only a set of tasks remained constant throughout the year. After waking to the scent of freshly scattered rushes, you shift your weight towards the floor, followed by the tending of animals and the removal of weeds in the fields. Serf life isn't easy, but there wouldn't be a serf life if the village didn't even exist.
Hello and welcome to the Malvenwald series. This is the second episode where I will be working on the interior of the first house of the town because I didn't get to finish the house in the first episode because I ran out of time and I was doing something within the day, so I'm doing it now, and I think it will take me a long time because I'm also working on very small field outside of the house, and yeah, I have nothing else to say, so just to preface this, there's a little inaccuracy here because one thing about the medieval villages is that they had huge fields, some spanning acres of land. However, Bloxburg restricts us from that, which I'm also thankful for because it would take forever to make one that big. However, the cost of this is the accuracy of the field, so we're only working on a relatively small farm. Speaking about farms, this episode, let's get talking about farms. Last time I kinda just went off about crucial parts of people's, especially peasants' homes back then. But this episode, I'm going to be talking about how village life mainly comprised of farm life in comparison to the guild and commerce life in huge medieval towns and cities or urban areas. To start off, manors would typically have villages in them. I'm pretty sure not the other way around where villages would have manors in them, because the peasants or the serfs or the villeins are the ones living in a settlement within the manor's land. Why? Because they work for the Lord in exchange for protection and land. They were legally bound to the Lord and were legally obliged to work for them. In comparison to medieval towns and cities, these serfs were, in a way, trapped, and their whole existence relied on working for the Lord, again, due to legal circumstances. Also, it's apparently the Lord's right to have serfs bound to their manor. Just putting it out there. By the way, there's this saying, the city air makes you free, and there's actually more to it than simply because there were no manor lords in cities you're legally bound to work for, but because of this so-called year and a day rule, where escapees from villages who now openly live in a chartered town, aka a city, for a year and a day are then considered to be free. Additionally, cities were eager to attract new residents, so protecting these runaways is actually beneficial to them. Why? Because mortality rates were especially high in cities, mainly due to disease and spread because of unsanitary practices. I just want to mention though that they weren't living in absolute filth. I mean, in modern standards, the way of living before definitely exceeds the worst of now, but that doesn't erase the fact that they still made an effort, at least, and attempted to put a stop to this. Laws were established for this reason, and early forms of our toilets existed and were called cesspits, oftentimes for wealthy families though. These cesspits eventually had to be emptied by gong farmers, who are people employed specifically to remove excrement from cesspits. How unfortunate. If not for cesspits though, people also had chamber pots, in which people would do the business, then emptied elsewhere. There is a myth that they simply throw their business out the window, but upon searching, I found sources suggesting that this doesn't necessarily happen all the time, just rarely. Just because people weren't scientifically advanced doesn't mean they were ignorant of the physical and mental effects of the pungent smell of human business in the streets. Where do these go then? Out to the river, out of sight, out of mind. Anyway, enough about business. Let's go back to rural life. Villains might have owed the Lord 2 or 3 days of labor each week, plowing or harvesting for the Lord, plus extra at times like harvest. These are called week work and boon work. They also paid rents in grain, eggs, or sometimes cash. Life was hard and centered on labor. Women spun wool, brewed ale, and joined in field work. Literacy was rare, but villagers had deep practical knowledge of seasons, plants, and weather. Of course, skills vital for farming. Anyway, if you were a serf who opted not to flee, there's a particular system of farming in which you would act upon. So like I said before, fields were huge in a village, unlike this one I'm making. Each field was designated for a specific crop, and due to their limited advancements in agriculture and science, they would often leave one field fallow or unplanted for an entire cycle so that the soil could recover. Without fertilization, the soil could go bad and ruin the crops themselves. These fields were divided into long, narrow strips, and these peasant families would own or rent these strips. Before planting though, they would often utilize oxen to plow the fields. In this depiction, one man guides the oxen with a whip while another guides the plow. I also just want to emphasize that farming was a communal practice in medieval times. They shared most of everything. They farmed in the same land, just in different strips, and villages shared oxen to ensure a steady supply of plowed land throughout the region. With the feudal system, they were all tasked with the same goal: work for the manor lord. And that encompasses basically the whole life of a serf in medieval times. Unless, of course, they find a way to flee and remain under the protection of towns before being deemed legally free. However, that does not mean rural life is inferior to urban life. People from these two sides of the same coin needed each other. They influenced the economy and justified each other's existence. They each had their own joys and sadnesses too. In villages, you don't get much freedom. Unless you're a manor lord, of course, or when famine hits and crops fail. In towns, you fear a lack of sanitation, fires, disease, and spread. In short, both reflect sweet truths and harsh realities. So, a serf would most probably yearn for the cities, and townspeople must have also weighed their options about living far away peacefully. What I realized from that has something to do with the insatiable human craving. It's natural and enlightens us about our personal desires and such, but it goes to show that men truly can't have everything. If I were a serf, I would most definitely want to live my life in a city free from a manor lord and free from my duties. But if I were to live in a town, I might feel suffocated at times and would just want to live a simple life, free from the density of population. However, this illustrates that insatiability is a natural human trait that can't be separated from us. But what we can dispel is that feeling of loss. That and desire are two distinct things, and the feeling of having nothing because you don't have something despite owning what you already have is a mindset that is present when humility is absent. As cliche as it sounds, it is true that a man's garbage is another man's treasure, and in life there's little to no middle ground that simply has all the positive traits of two things. Mostly, everything has a gray area that may leave a man feeling unaccomplished. So as a society, I believe that everyone, regardless of their identity or beliefs, has an important role to play. Two people could be on distinct and opposite sides, but it's the balance between them that matters. However, when one goes as far as to stand for extreme stances beyond the average reach, that's when things start to crumble. Corruption is a familiar subject that isn't just a current issue, but has been a recurring theme throughout our history. Bribery was common in medieval times, which was the abuse of power and influence by officials. Torture and unjustified killings were also a huge thing, primarily due to the need to quote-unquote maintain order. It caused a lot of injustices, the same way our world is experiencing injustice, just in a more sly, brazen-faced, advanced way now. Honestly, two very distinct and opposite political sides existing is alright, but when people start taking advantage of their freedom to do anything, to think anything, they start getting more curious, and they start craving to go extreme. And so people just start attacking each other, hopping into digital bandwagons, and end up in echo chambers. So this reminds us to remain grounded in such a way that we don't allow ourselves to succumb to extreme curiosity. The problem though is that many other people love getting involved in these things because they're forgetting the most basic aspects of living and communicating, and they'd rather commit a crime and be honored by their fellow people at the expense of others. It's challenging to say that our social and communication issues in today's digital realm are easy to resolve with just a simple communicate with each other and talk it out, hug it out. It's not that simple, is it? But there's definitely a starting point, and I just want to see the day when people start recognizing that option. This is why debates exist and why respectful discourse is encouraged. I myself am not fully, if not even half knowledgeable knowledgeable about the countless political and social issues happening in today's world. But I do know that we as a whole should start waking up. Not in the sense that we want to battle the bad system and such, not in that simple frame, but in the sense that we want to fight and struggle with purpose, reason, and intention to resolve a problem, not make more. Empires have fallen and eras have become bygone because they lost to the challenge of time, because they couldn't withstand the pressure of temptation and curiosity. Communities have gone as far as to be extreme, to cause wars and fight each other, all for the glory and vengeance that they cannot bring to the afterlife anyway. So if you ask me, the best approach to life in general is to remain humble yet keen, like we're simply farmers who sow good seeds and reap bountiful harvests. 2 episodes to finish the house, but now that I'm finally done, I get to tour you guys around the house. So here it is in its final form. I'm pretty new to this like kind of architecture and kind of like detailing and stuff. And you know what, I'm kind of proud of it. I like this house. And so let's start. This is the front of the house. It looks fine, I guess. There are a bunch of small tiny mistakes. The timber kind of ate these details. They're so uneven, and there's also that. So when you enter the door, you're gonna be met by the living room, dining room, kitchen, and all of that all at the same time. It's just all in one room. And you're gonna notice that there are more things coming from outside that I didn't notice, but I'm noticing them just now, so it's kind of sad. There's a stool there, fireflies, and mostly custom shelf, and I kind of like it. I'm not so sure if this is accurate. I mean, I didn't look into it that much, but there are some elements of this that do resemble medieval times. For example, these rushes that I mentioned from last episode, they're kind of yellowish now, so they're not fresh rushes, but they're there. And a trestle table. That's a trestle table. It's supposed to represent a trestle table. I did not want to custom make one, and you know what? It was taking forever, because speaking of custom made, there's also a custom made pig here, and I kind of like it. I don't know what its name is, but it's super duper cute. And this is the part of the house that I'm most proud of. It's the fireplace. Really crucial part of the home. And I don't know, I realized this just now, but it's not supposed to be wooden. Just ignore that for now. Anyway, over here there's some details that I really appreciate. For example, I just custom made these stuff here. I don't know what those are. It could be herbs and whatnot. I don't know. There's a magical staff there. A broomstick. I'm not sure, but did they keep their firewood in like a container like this? I'm not so sure about that, but yeah, there's firewood there, a fireplace, and you're gonna notice, but the walls here, when you get to the middle, it's kind of like a gradient. It turns darker, and that's actually because the fire, you know, it causes this very sooty look on the walls and everything nearby. That's why you're gonna notice that the shelves here are also quite dark, and they're also crooked, and I like that detail so much. And there's just a bunch of pots. I don't know, when I was looking through reference pictures, there's always a bunch of pots. Could be containers of a lot of stuff. There wasn't much storage back then in these quaint homes, so I guess they stored a bunch of their food here in their pots. I did hear though that there were underground floors where they would keep their food. I didn't actually look into it quite much, but yeah, I just know that these pots contain something. They're not just there for decoration. When you go up here, it's the second floor, of course. There are more rushes and hay bales. I don't know why I put a bunch of hay bales, but they're there. And you're gonna notice there's more of this shelving, except it's not that dark anymore, unlike these ones, because there's no fire here. And more apples. This is the bed. Oh, and there's this other detail that I really liked, but look at the lamps here. The main source of light It's it's custom made. It kind of looks weird. There are no hollow like gable roofs, so I tried my best to make the roofs look, kind of, those. And when you look at those like medieval ceilings, it's very like detailed and stuff, and it kind of curves upwards, but it's not hollow, so I can't curve it upwards. So I just tried my best. I put arches there, more of these structurals. I honestly do not know what to put on the walls. The walls could have definitely been empty, but I try to make it look interesting at least. Oh, this is a chamber pot. I'm not sure if this resembles an actual chamber pot, but this is where people would poo and pee. I should have put something in here actually, now that I think about it. There's another trestle table over here and a few jars. I'm not sure how they acquired glass jars. And there's a chest here, which also doubles as a wardrobe. Of course, very important part of the house. Yeah, that's all with the house. Oh. You know what? Just ignore it. He looks cute anyway from the side. I love that little piglet. Anyway, oh, and there are pots here as well, which surprisingly are metal. And I'm not sure if their pots look like this before, and pans. Anyway, going out here is the farm. Super duper small magical farm with weird crops. Oh, and I'll introduce you as well to the ox. I don't know what happened to him. I am so sorry. While building him, I actually don't know how to build him. He looks interesting. Anyway, these are the crops, and I just want to explain my thought process in here. So at first I was going to do like all of them were gonna look like this, but it was kind of boring to do all wheat. So what I just decided to do was I made this just wheat and then magical flowers over here. These are supposedly nettles, but we can just consider them as just magical crops. It's all in the imagination, honestly. That's all, but I kind of appreciate it. It is small, but a lot of work was put into it and a lot of thought, because I honestly was unfamiliar on how to do this kind of house at first. But you know what? I pulled it off quite decently for a first try. For the next episode, I am going to make an altar or a church. Thank you so much for watching the episodes, and goodbye. 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 Goodbye.